The check was for $50,000. Jonah Mercer looked at it once, placed it flat on the workbench, and set a small brass level on top of it so the draft from the open window would not carry it away. Across the room, Laurel Winslow watched him from her wheelchair. She had expected surprise. Maybe gratitude. Probably calculation. She had learned to expect calculation from men. Instead, Jonah picked up the invoice he had written in pencil, tapped the bottom line with one grease-darkened finger, and said, "The replacement relay was $87. Labor was $100. You already paid the service deposit, so you owe me $187. Laurel stared at him. "And the check? Is $50,000. I know what I wrote. So do I." He pushed it back toward her. Outside, October rain tapped against the windows of the old Milwaukee carriage house. Inside, neither of them moved. Jonah needed money more desperately than Laurel knew. His truck payment was late. His daughter's dental bill was sitting unopened on the kitchen counter because opening it would not make the number smaller. His savings account had $43 in it, and 3 days earlier, his landlord had left a message reminding him that understanding had limits. Jonah Mercer needed money. He simply did not need hers that way. Laurel looked down at the check, then at the man standing beside her grandfather's workbench. And for reasons she could not yet explain, his refusal frightened her more than every man who had ever told her he loved her, because Laurel Winslow had spent 3 years learning exactly what people wanted from her. Jonah was the first man she could not read. If you believe actions reveal people more clearly than promises ever can, tap like, and tell me where you're watching from. Because the $50,000 check was not the real test. And Jonah had no idea how much money Laurel Winslow was actually hiding. The first time Jonah saw the Winslow house, he thought the address had to be wrong. He pulled his 12-year-old truck to the curb, checked the message on his phone, then looked through the windshield again. The house stood above Lake Michigan behind a wall of wet maple trees, 3 stories of limestone and dark brick, with narrow windows facing the water. It was not enormous in the theatrical way of newer mansions. It was older than that. Quieter, the kind of house that had stopped needing to prove it was expensive several generations ago. His daughter Elsie leaned forward from the back seat. "Is that a castle?" "No. It has towers. They're chimneys. There are 6. Rich people get cold too." Elsie considered that. She was 7 years old and had reached the age when every answer created 2 additional questions. "Are the chimneys for one person?" "I don't know." "Does the person have 6 fireplaces?" "I don't know." "Do you think she has a dragon?" Jonah looked at her in the mirror. That would explain the service call. Elsie smiled. That smile was why he had brought her. Not because he wanted a 7-year-old wandering around a job site. Not because it was professional. Because his mother, who normally watched Elsie after school, had called that morning with a fever, and the babysitter Jonah sometimes used could not come until 4. The Winslow job was supposed to take 90 minutes. Inspect a private wheelchair lift. Diagnose why it kept shutting down between floors. Submit an estimate. Leave. He had already explained the situation to the property manager over the phone. The woman had gone silent for several seconds before saying she would ask Miss Winslow. 10 minutes later, she called back. "Bring your daughter." Nothing more. Jonah parked. He turned around. "You stay with me." "I know. You don't touch anything." "I know. You don't ask anybody if they own a dragon." Elsie frowned. "That was going to be my first question. I suspected." He got his tool bag from behind the seat. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman in her early 60s stood waiting. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yes. I'm Nora Bell. I manage the property." She looked at Elsie. "This is my daughter Elsie." Elsie held out her hand because Jonah had taught her to. "Nice to meet you." Nora's expression softened. "And you?" She led them through a wide foyer. The house was beautiful but not comfortable. Jonah noticed that immediately. There were expensive things everywhere. Paintings. Old furniture, stone floors, a curved staircase with a carved wood railing, but almost nothing personal. No shoes by the door. No mail on a table. No family photographs. The rooms felt arranged rather than lived in. Then he noticed the modifications. A discreet ramp where 2 steps had once separated the foyer from the east hallway. A widened doorway. Automatic operators on several doors. Low-profile thresholds. Grab bars that had been installed carefully enough to look intentional. The work was expensive. Some of it was excellent. Some of it was not. Jonah spotted 3 mistakes before they reached the lift. The private elevator sat behind paneled doors designed to disappear into the hallway. Nora pressed the call button. Nothing happened. "Third time this week," she said. "How old?" "Installed 20 months ago." "Manufacturer?" She told him. "Good equipment. Not cheap." "Any recent service?" "Twice, same contractor?" "Yes, and they didn't fix it?" "They said the control board needed replacing. Did they replace it?" "Last month." Jonah looked at her. "And now it's failing again?" "Yes," that interested him. A control board on that model should not fail twice in 20 months. He crouched beside the lower panel and opened his bag. Elsie sat on a bench against the wall and pulled a paperback from her backpack. Jonah had removed 3 screws when he heard wheels approaching behind him. Not the harsh rattle of a hospital chair. A quieter mechanical sound. He turned. The first thing he noticed about Laurel Winslow was not the wheelchair. It was her eyes. Gray, steady, evaluating. She wore dark trousers and a cream sweater. Her brown hair falling just past her shoulders. No makeup that Jonah could see. No jewelry except a thin watch. She was younger than he expected. Maybe 38. 39. He knew her name, because almost everyone in Milwaukee knew the name. Winslow Industrial had begun as a machine company decades earlier, and had grown into a network of precision manufacturing, logistics and engineering businesses. Laurel had taken over after her father died. Jonah knew that much. He also knew there had been an accident. Everyone knew that too. A highway collision. 3 years earlier. He remembered seeing something about it on the local news. He had not paid attention. At the time, his own life had contained more than enough bad news. "You're the 3rd technician," Laurel said. Jonah stood. "Jonah Mercer." "I know your name." "All right." The first technician replaced 2 sensors. The second replaced a control board. Neither solved the problem. Jonah glanced at the open panel. Then replacing another control board would probably be expensive entertainment. Nora looked down quickly. Jonah wondered if he had already said too much. Laurel did not smile. "What do you think is wrong?" "I don't know yet. The previous technicians gave me theories within 5 minutes. How'd those theories work out?" A pause. Something almost moved at the corner of Nora's mouth. Laurel looked at Jonah for another moment. Then she turned toward Elsie. "And who is this?" "My daughter. I can answer." Jonah looked over. Elsie closed her book. "I'm Elsie." Laurel looked back at Jonah. "You brought a child to a mechanical service call. Childcare fell through. And you thought that made this appropriate?" "I called first." "You called Nora. I assume she represented you." "She does." "Then yes." Laurel's gaze sharpened. Jonah had seen that look before. Not from billionaires. From customers. From supervisors. From people accustomed to others becoming nervous when they were displeased. Jonah rarely became nervous. He became careful. There was a difference. Laurel turned to Nora. "You approve this?" "I did." "Why?" "Because you told me to." Laurel seemed to remember. "Yes." She looked at Elsie again. The girl had reopened her book. "You read while your father works?" Elsie nodded. "Mostly. What happens when you get bored?" "I draw. And after that, I ask questions." Jonah pointed at her without looking. "We're trying to delay that stage." For half a second, Laurel almost smiled. It vanished quickly. Find the problem, Miss Mercer. I intend to. She rolled away. Jonah watched her disappear down the hall. Nora waited until Laurel was out of earshot. That went better than usual. That was better? Considerably. Jonah crouched again. What happened to the last technician? He argued. About the repair? About everything. What happened? He lasted 37 minutes. Jonah checked his watch. I've got 29 left. This time Nora did smile. It took Jonah 46 minutes to find the fault. The control board was fine. So were the sensors. The problem was a relay buried behind the secondary cabinet. Heat damage. Intermittent connection. Cheap component. Simple repair. But finding it required following the circuit instead of replacing whatever diagnostic code happened to mention first. He removed the relay and held it under the hallway light. Nora leaned closer. That little thing stopped the entire elevator? That little thing interrupted power to something that stopped the entire elevator. How much? The part? Yes, under $100. Nora stared at him. The last invoice was $9,400. Jonah slowly lowered the relay. For what? Control board. Labor and emergency diagnostics. Do you have the invoice? Yes. I'd like to see it. Nora hesitated. Why? Because either there's something about this system I'm missing, or somebody enjoys billing you. Laurel's voice came from behind them. How much to repair it? Jonah turned. $187 plus the original service charge. Her expression did not change. That is not what I asked. It's what it costs. I asked what you charge. That's what I charge. You drove across the city. Service charge covers that. You spent an hour diagnosing a problem 2 other companies missed. My hourly rate covers that. You could charge more. I could also charge for a transmission rebuild when somebody needs a spark plug. Doesn't make it right. Laurel looked at the burned relay in his hand. When can you replace it? Tomorrow morning. Why not today? Supplier has the correct part. They close at 5, it's 3:20. 40 minutes there. 40 back if traffic behaves. Installation and testing after that. So today. Jonah looked at Elsie. Then at Laurel. I have somewhere I need to be at 5:30. Reschedule it. No. The word landed softly. Nora went completely still. Laurel's eyes narrowed. No? My daughter has a school conference. You brought her to work but cannot move a school conference? Correct. You understand I'm willing to pay an emergency rate. I understand. How much? It isn't about the rate. Everything is about the rate eventually. Jonah zipped one section of his tool bag. Tomorrow at 8. 7. School drop-off is 7:40. 8:15. Done. He did not realize until later that this was the first argument Laurel Winslow had lost in her own house in nearly 3 years. The next morning, Jonah arrived at 8:12. Laurel was already waiting beside the lift. You're early. 3 minutes. I assumed single fathers ran late. I assumed CEOs had better hobbies than timing repairmen. Nora made a small sound that might have been a cough. Jonah installed the relay. Then he tested the lift. Once, twice, 5 times. He loaded his tool bag onto the platform to add weight and ran it again. Laurel watched. What are you doing? Making sure I'm right. The diagnostics are clear? Diagnostics can be wrong. So can technicians. Exactly. The lift completed another trip. Jonah crouched beside the lower track. That was when he noticed something else. A slight scrape. Wrong alignment. He ran his fingers along the metal. Who installed this? Laurel told him. Same company that serviced it? Yes. They shimmed the track badly. Is that dangerous? Not today. Maybe not for years. But it's wearing unevenly. Laurel's expression hardened. Can you fix it? Yes. How much? Couple hundred. Do it. I'd need another 2 hours. Do it. Jonah looked at his schedule. He had another service call at 11. Could move it to afternoon. He nodded. All right. He spent the next 3 hours correcting work that should have been done properly the first time. Laurel remained nearby much longer than necessary. At first, Jonah assumed she was supervising. Then, he realized she was watching how he worked. Not the repair. He measured twice. Marked once. Cleaned every surface before reinstalling anything. Placed screws in a magnetic tray instead of scattering them across the floor. When he discovered a decorative trim piece had been damaged during the original installation, he photographed it before touching it. You document everything? Laurel asked. Anything someone might blame me for later. Experience? Painful experience. He adjusted the track. Laurel watched his hands. You own your company? Company is generous. What do you call it? Mercer Mechanical. How many employees? 1. That is not a company. It has invoices. So does a plumber. I also fix plumbing. She looked at him. Jonah kept working. After a moment she said, You have an unusual sales strategy. I wasn't selling anything. That part is obvious. Around noon, Nora brought coffee and sandwiches. Jonah started to refuse. Then his stomach reminded him he had skipped breakfast. He sat on the floor beside the open lift cabinet. Nora handed Laurel a plate at a nearby table. Jonah noticed Laurel did not eat. She moved food around with her fork while reading email on a tablet. At one point, the tablet slipped. She caught it before it hit the floor. Her right leg moved, barely, tightening near the knee. Jonah saw it only because he happened to be looking. Laurel saw him see it. Her face changed immediately. Finish the lift. Jonah looked back at the cabinet. All right. No question. No comment. No hopeful expression. Nothing. 10 minutes later, Laurel spoke again. You aren't going to ask? Ask what? You know what? Jonah tightened a bolt. If you wanted me to know, you'd tell me. The room became quiet. Laurel looked down at her plate. Most people ask. Most people are nosy. You're not? Very. That earned him the first real smile. Small, brief, but real. Then why not? Jonah set down his wrench. Because curiosity isn't permission. Laurel stopped smiling. Something else replaced it. Something more careful. He finished the lift at 1:20. Laurel rode it twice. Smooth, silent, perfect, she reached the lower floor and turned toward him. I have another job. I'm listening. The West Carriage House. What about it? Everything. Jonah blinked. That's specific. The electrical system is outdated. Heating is unreliable. The workshop has not been used in years. There is water damage along the north wall. I want a complete assessment. That's not a 2-hour job. I know. It might take a week. I know. I have other customers. Move them. No. Laurel exhaled through her nose. Jonah had begun to recognize the sound. It meant he was irritating her. He was starting to suspect he did that more effectively than most people. I can give you 3 days next week, he said. Then another 2 the following week. I want it completed continuously. I can't abandon customers who already booked me because a richer customer showed up. Her expression shifted. You assume I'm rich. Jonah looked around the limestone hallway. I'm taking a wild swing. You might be wrong. About the house? About me. There was something in her voice he did not understand. Jonah shrugged. Doesn't change my calendar. She studied him. 3 days. Next week. 7,000. For what? The assessment. No. Laurel stared. No? I charge by the day for assessment work. 7,000 is ridiculous. Fine, 5 still ridiculous. 3? My rate is 650 a day. Laurel looked almost offended. That is absurdly low. It's my rate, then change it, maybe next year. She looked toward Nora. Does he do this with everyone? I have only observed him doing it with you. Jonah packed his tools. Laurel's eyes followed him. Monday, 8:15. 8:15. Miss Mercer, Miss Winslow. Her mouth tightened. 8:15. He nodded. See you then. The carriage house stood 60 yards from the main residence. Once, it had held horses. Later, automobiles. Laurel's grandfather had converted part of it into a mechanical workshop during the 1960s. By the time Jonah entered it Monday morning, dust covered nearly everything. Old drill presses, metal cabinets, wooden benches, a lathe under canvas, rows of hand tools mounted on pegboard. Laurel followed him inside using a newly installed ramp along the side entrance. She stopped near the main bench. Jonah noticed her gaze change. You spent time here? When I was young. With your grandfather? Yes, he built things. He repaired things. Difference? He believed there was. Jonah lifted the canvas from the lathe. Good machine. Old, but good. You haven't used this place? Not since the accident. Jonah did not ask why. He moved along the wall checking outlets. Laurel rolled toward the main bench and opened a shallow drawer. Inside were measuring instruments wrapped in cloth. Calipers, squares, gauges, and a small brass machinist's level. Its surface darkened with age. She picked it up. My grandfather carried this for 42 years. Jonah looked over. He trusted that thing? He trusted nothing else. Smart man. He would check brand new digital equipment against it. Smarter man. Laurel turned the level in her hands. He gave it to me when I was 12. Jonah noticed scratches along one edge. Not decorative. Used, this was yours? Eventually, you worked out here? My father wanted me in offices. And your grandfather? He thought anyone who ran a factory should know what a machine sounded like when it was about to fail. Jonah smiled. I would have liked him. He would have made you prove that. Even better. Laurel placed the level carefully on the workbench. Jonah spent the morning tracing electrical circuits. At 11, he found 2 overloaded lines. At 12, evidence of moisture behind the northern wall. At 1, a cracked heat exchanger. At 2, he discovered the roof drainage had been redirected badly during a renovation and was sending water into the foundation. The problems were not catastrophic. Together, they were expensive. Laurel sat at the workbench while he explained. What would you do? She asked. Repair the roof drainage first. No point fixing walls if water keeps coming in. And then electrical, then heating, then cosmetic work. What would it cost? To make it functional? Yes, maybe 30,000. To restore it completely? Depends how fancy you want to get. I do not want fancy. He looked around. What do you want? Laurel did not answer immediately. I don't know. Jonah closed his notebook. Then don't spend money until you do. Most contractors would be happy to help me discover my vision at $100 an hour. Most contractors have boats. You don't? I have a truck that makes a noise every time I turn left. She looked at him. You need a new truck? I need to stop turning left. Again, that small smile. By Wednesday, Jonah had learned 3 things about Laurel Winslow. First, she was not cold. Not really. Cold people did not notice when Nora's wrist hurt and quietly moved the heavier pantry deliveries to another day. Cold people did not know the first names of the night security guards at their company. Cold people did not keep a stack of thank you notes from factory workers in a locked drawer. Laurel was guarded. There was a difference. Second, she hated being helped without being asked. Jonah learned that when he automatically reached toward her wheelchair as she crossed a difficult threshold. Don't. He withdrew his hand immediately. Sorry, no defensiveness. No embarrassment. Just sorry. Something about that mattered to her. The third thing was stranger. Laurel Winslow seemed to be living far below what Jonah expected. Yes, the house was magnificent. But it belonged to a family trust, Nora explained. Laurel drove no expensive cars, bought almost nothing, had reduced the household staff. The West Wing was closed. Several pieces of artwork had disappeared. One afternoon, Jonah overheard a phone conversation about selling property. He did not listen intentionally. Laurel's voice carried through the open workshop door. "No, Charles. Sell the Scottsdale parcel." A pause. "I understand the tax consequence." Another pause. "No. I don't care what father intended." Her tone sharpened. "I said sell it." Jonah walked farther into the workshop. Not his business. Later that day, a man arrived. Tall, tailored coat, silver at his temples, the sort of face that looked familiar because it had probably appeared beside charity headlines. He entered the carriage house without knocking. "Laurel," Jonah looked up from an electrical panel. Laurel became motionless. Not physically. Something deeper. Sebastian Vale. Jonah knew the name. Board member at Winslow Industrial. Venture investor. Occasional television interview. Sebastian's attention moved to Jonah. "And you are?" "Working," Sebastian waited. Jonah continued tightening a terminal. Laurel said, "Jonah Mercer." "Contractor," Sebastian looked him over. "Of course." Jonah did not know what that meant. He decided not to care. Sebastian turned back to Laurel. "You didn't return my calls." There was nothing to discuss. There is quite a lot to discuss. Not here. Then, the house. "No, Laurel, no." The word changed the air. Sebastian glanced at Jonah. "Could we have privacy?" Jonah looked at Laurel. Her decision. She nodded once. "I need to check the exterior line anyway." Jonah took his jacket and left. He walked around the north side slowly. Not because he wanted to eavesdrop. Because the gutter really did need checking. Through the wall, he could hear only fragments: board, liquidity, responsibility, offer. And once, louder than the rest, "You should have accepted help when I offered it." Jonah moved farther away. 20 minutes later, Sebastian came outside. His expression was controlled. He stopped beside Jonah. "You're doing renovation work?" "Assessment and repair." "How long?" "Ask Ms. Winslow." Sebastian looked toward the building. "She has a tendency to begin projects she cannot realistically sustain." Jonah said nothing. "You should make certain she can pay you." That got his attention. Sebastian smiled slightly. "You didn't know?" "Know what?" "Nothing." He put on leather gloves. "Just professional advice." Jonah watched him walk toward a black sedan. When he returned inside, Laurel was staring at her grandfather's brass level. He did not ask about Sebastian. He did not ask whether she could pay. He opened his notebook. "The drainage line needs another downspout on the north corner." Laurel looked at him. "That's all?" "That's what I found." "Sebastian spoke to you?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "That I should make sure you can pay me." Her face became unreadable. And your invoice is due Friday. You're not concerned?" "If the check bounces, I'll become concerned." "You truly have no idea who I am, do you?" "I know exactly who you are." Her eyes narrowed. "Who?" "My customer." For a long moment, Laurel did not speak. Then she looked away. Friday afternoon, Jonah received payment. Exactly the invoice amount. Not $1 more. He smiled when he saw it. Monday, Laurel offered him another week. Then another. The carriage house project expanded gradually. Electrical repairs became insulation. Insulation became workshop restoration. Workshop restoration became a new accessible entrance after Jonah pointed out the existing ramp was too steep in icy weather. "You designed this?" Laurel asked, studying his sketch. "Designed is generous. It's dimensioned. So are drawings on cereal boxes. You calculated turning radius. I know how tape measures work." She stared at the page. "This could be prefabricated." Jonah looked up. "What?" "The threshold system. Ramp, landing, rail and drainage channel." "For what?" "Older houses. Small businesses. Places where people cannot afford a full architectural retrofit. It's just a ramp." No. She moved the paper closer. It's a system. Jonah had spent his adult life around people who used complicated words to make simple work sound expensive. Laurel did something different. She looked at simple things and saw what they could become. Over the following week, she asked questions. What took longest during installation? What measurements varied most? What parts failed in winter? What could be standardized? What required custom fabrication? Jonah answered. Then she asked more. One afternoon, she rolled a whiteboard into the carriage house. Jonah stared. What is that? A whiteboard. Why? You're going to explain residential access retrofits. I'm going to fix your heater. You can do both. No one can explain anything while replacing a heat exchanger. You talk while eating. That is different. How? I enjoy eating. By the end of the day, the whiteboard was covered. Door widths, threshold heights, slope ratios, modular panels, weather seals, drainage, turn radius, portable transfer supports. Laurel stared at it. This is a business. Jonah wiped grease from his hands. It's home repair. It is a fragmented industry full of expensive custom work and poor standardization. That sounded romantic. It should. He laughed. Laurel did not. She was serious. Jonah stopped laughing. You actually mean it? Yes, no, why? Because I fix things. That is why. I don't run companies. I do. You have a company. I have several. Exactly so. So why do you need me? Laurel looked at the whiteboard. Because every executive in my building would turn this into a presentation before touching a doorway. And? You touched the doorway first. The sentence stayed with him. He tried to forget it. He could not. Elsie met Laurel properly 3 weeks later. Jonah had avoided bringing her again. Then his mother's fever returned. The after-school program closed unexpectedly, and Jonah had a delivery arriving at the carriage house that afternoon. He called Laurel. I need to leave at 2. Why? Elsie. Bring her. Jonah hesitated. You sure? I said bring her. Elsie arrived carrying markers, a notebook, and enough questions to power a small city. She remembered Laurel. You're the lady with 6 chimneys. Laurel looked at Jonah. He closed his eyes. I specifically told her not to discuss the chimneys. You have 6, Elsie said. I'm aware. Do you use all of them? No, then why do you have 6? The house is old, so you bought it with 6? My family built it. How long ago? Elsie. Laurel lifted a hand. It's fine. She looked at the girl. 1894. Elsie's eyes widened. You're that old? Jonah turned away because if he laughed, he might lose the contract. Laurel stared at Elsie. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. Not the small, controlled smile Jonah had seen. A full laugh. Warm and surprised. It transformed her. Jonah looked back. For one strange second, the carriage house seemed less dusty, less empty. Laurel caught him looking. The laughter disappeared. But the warmth did not entirely leave her face. Elsie sat at the end of the workbench drawing while Jonah and Laurel discussed the modular threshold system. After 20 minutes, she interrupted. This one is wrong. Jonah looked over. What? She pointed at his sketch. The door. What about it? If somebody is sitting, they have to move backward to open it. Jonah stared. She was right. He had designed the swing based on the existing architecture. Laurel rolled closer. Show me. Elsie demonstrated with 2 markers. This is the chair. This is the door. If the door comes here, the chair has to go there. But there's a wall. Laurel looked at Jonah. He looked at Laurel. Elsie continued drawing. Why don't you make the door go sideways? A sliding door? Yes. In some houses you can. So do that. Laurel said quietly, pocket conversion module. Jonah sighed. Please don't turn my 7-year-old into management. Too late. Elsie looked between them. Do I get paid? Jonah pointed at Laurel. See what you started? Laurel smiled. Later that afternoon, Jonah was outside unloading material when Elsie spoke to Laurel alone. What happened to your legs? Children asked questions adults spent enormous energy avoiding. Laurel looked toward the open door. Jonah was out of sight. A car accident. Do they hurt? Sometimes. Can you feel them? Some things. Are you going to walk again? There it was. The question every adult had learned not to ask. Laurel looked down at her hands. I don't know. Elsie nodded as if Laurel had told her tomorrow's weather might change. Okay, that was all. No sadness. No forced optimism. No declaration that everything would work out. Just okay. Then Elsie held up her drawing. I made the door sideways. Laurel took the paper. You did. So people don't have to move backward. Laurel stared at the crooked blue lines. Something inside her gave way by a fraction. Not enough to be seen. Enough to be felt. She folded the drawing carefully and placed it beside her grandfather's brass level. That evening, Jonah found it there. He looked at Laurel. You kept it. It has design value. Of course, it does. Definitely, she narrowed her eyes. You're mocking me. Never, you are. A little. She looked at the drawing. Then she said, almost too quietly for him to hear, no one talks to me the way she does. She's 7. I noticed. 7-year-olds don't understand social fear. Maybe adults understand too much of it. Jonah stopped packing his tools. Laurel was still looking at the drawing. He sensed a door opening. A small one. He did not push. Good night, Laurel. It was the first time he had used her first name. She noticed. So did he. Neither mentioned it. By December, the carriage house had become something neither of them intended. Half workshop, half prototype lab. Jonah built components. Laurel sourced materials. She arranged calls with 2 engineers without telling Jonah until they showed up. He threatened to leave. She threatened to pay them anyway. He stayed. They argued about everything. Material thickness. Fasteners. Pricing. Whether Jonah's handwritten notes counted as documentation. Whether Laurel's spreadsheets contained information human beings could understand. They began developing a modular accessibility system for older homes and small storefronts. Not medical equipment. Not charity. Construction products. Practical ones. Affordable ones. Laurel named the project Threshold North. Jonah hated the name. You hate every name, she said. I liked Mercer Mechanical. That sounds like someone who unclogs sinks. I do unclog sinks. You are proving my point. What's wrong with being useful? Nothing. Then stop insulting plumbers. I did not insult plumbers. You did spiritually. Elsie sided with Jonah. Nora sided with Laurel. The name stayed. Jonah discovered Laurel was ruthless in negotiations and terrible at ordering lunch. Laurel discovered Jonah could calculate material waste in his head, but regularly forgot where he left his phone. He discovered she liked black coffee and old mystery novels. She discovered he still wore his wedding ring on a chain under his shirt. Neither mentioned that discovery for weeks. One snowy evening, they worked later than usual. Elsie had gone home with Jonah's mother. Nora had left. The carriage house was quiet except for the furnace Jonah had finally repaired. Laurel sat at the workbench reviewing prototype costs. Jonah was sanding the edge of an aluminum panel. She looked toward him. Your wife. The sander stopped. Jonah waited. You never talk about her. He switched off the machine. Her name was Rebecca. How long? 4 years. I'm sorry. Jonah nodded. She got sick when Elsie was 2. Laurel did not ask what kind. He appreciated that. She was sick 18 months. I spent most of that time thinking if I worked enough, found enough doctors, drove enough places, fixed enough problems, I could keep the thing I cared about from happening. He looked at the aluminum panel. Turns out some things don't care how useful you are. Laurel said nothing. Jonah continued. After she died, everybody told me I had to be strong for Elsie. He gave a small, humorless laugh. I hated that sentence. Why? Because people say strong when they mean silent. Laurel's eyes moved toward him. So I stopped talking about Rebecca. Does Elsie remember her? A little. Do you talk about her with Elsie? Yes, then you didn't stop. No. Jonah looked at Laurel. Just with adults. The furnace clicked. Snow moved against the windows. Laurel rested her hands on the wheels of her chair. My fiancé left 6 months after the accident. Jonah did not move. She had never discussed him. Sebastian? No, that surprised him. His name was Nathaniel Cole. Jonah waited. We had been engaged 8 months. Her voice was flat, not detached, deliberately controlled. He was in the car. Jonah remembered the article. The passenger? I was the passenger. He was driving. Jonah's stomach tightened. Laurel continued. Black ice. Another vehicle crossed the median. It was not his fault. She said the sentence as if she had repeated it 1,000 times. He walked away with a broken wrist. Her hands tightened slightly. I did not. Jonah said nothing. During the first months, Nathaniel was perfect. Flowers, hospital visits. Every appointment. She looked toward the dark window. Then doctors stopped using words like temporary. Her jaw tightened. He began missing appointments. A pause. Then dinners. Another. Then days. Jonah knew the pattern before she finished. One night he told me he loved me too much to watch me become someone I hated. Jonah's expression changed. Laurel noticed. What? That's a coward's sentence. He thought it was compassionate. It wasn't. I know. He made leaving sound like something he was doing for you. Yes, Jonah leaned against the bench. That's cowardice wearing a tie. Laurel looked at him for a long time. She almost smiled. But the memory was too heavy. After Nathaniel there were others. Jonah waited. Men? Yes. He did not ask how many. Some knew me before the accident. Some approached afterward. Her expression hardened. They were attentive. Jonah heard the disgust beneath the word. Too attentive? They loved my company. She did not mean Winslow Industrial. They loved dinners here. They loved introductions. They loved my name. Jonah understood. And you couldn't tell whether they loved you. No, snow ticked against the glass. So I changed the conditions. Jonah waited. Laurel rolled closer to the workbench. I sold several visible assets. Moved others. Closed accounts people could easily associate with me. Let rumors spread that the accident, litigation, and company restructuring had damaged my personal finances. Jonah's brow furrowed. You told people you were broke? Not broke. Broke-ish? For someone with this house. He almost smiled. Why? Laurel stared at the brass level. I wanted to see what happened. Jonah already knew. They left. One stopped returning calls within a week. Another pause. One suggested we remain friends. Jonah shook his head. Another informed me his family had concerns about the amount of care I might eventually require. That one made Jonah angry. Not loudly. His anger rarely appeared loudly. He said that? Yes. What did you say? I thanked him for his honesty. That was generous. I wanted to throw something. That would have also been honest. Laurel smiled faintly. Then it disappeared. Sebastian was different. Jonah looked at her. He knew more than the others. Not everything, but enough. He wanted to marry you? He suggested it. That sounds romantic. It was presented like a merger. More romantic. She ignored him. When he believed my personal holdings were gone, the suggestion disappeared. Jonah nodded slowly. Now he understood why Sebastian's presence affected her. Why money came up. Why Laurel watched invoices so carefully. Why she seemed suspicious every time Jonah declined an inflated payment. How much did you actually lose? He asked. Laurel looked at him. Jonah raised a hand. You don't have to answer. I lost almost nothing. He blinked. The Scottsdale property? Tax planning. The reduced staff? I dislike strangers in the house. The closed West Wing? I never use it. The artwork? Loaned to a museum. Jonah stared. Laurel stared back. Then he laughed. He could not help it. Her expression became offended. You find this amusing? You've spent months pretending to be poor in a house with 6 chimneys. I never said poor. Elsie is going to love this. You are not telling Elsie. I'm absolutely telling Elsie. Jonah, she already thinks you have a dragon. Laurel began laughing too. It lasted only seconds. Then the room settled again. Jonah picked up the sanding block. You know what the strange part is? What? I still don't know how much money you have. Laurel's smile faded. You could ask. He began sanding again. She watched him. You're not going to? No. Why? Jonah shrugged. Not relevant to the hinge design. The sanding block moved back and forth. Once, twice, 3 times. Laurel looked away before he could see what that answer did to her. She had tested men with poverty. Tested them with inconvenience. Tested them with silence. She had watched attraction evaporate when luxury disappeared. Jonah Mercer had just been told there was a hidden fortune somewhere behind the locked doors of Laurel Winslow's life. And his first concern was still a hinge. That should have reassured her. Instead, it made him dangerous. Because distrust was easy when people behaved predictably. Jonah was becoming harder to dismiss. By January, Threshold North had 3 working prototypes. By February, it had a pilot agreement with 2 local renovation companies. Laurel wanted to form a separate corporation. Jonah wanted to keep testing. Laurel wanted patents. Jonah wanted better weather seals. Laurel wanted a product launch. Jonah wanted 6 more weeks. You cannot improve forever, she said. I can try. That is not business. It is if you don't want callbacks. You think every problem is mechanical. You think every problem needs a quarterly report. Most do. Your furnace disagrees. They were arguing when Nora entered. Laurel. Something in her voice ended the conversation. Laurel turned. Nora held a tablet. The board called an emergency meeting. When? Tomorrow. Why? Nora glanced at Jonah. Laurel noticed. Say it. Sebastian has requested a temporary review of your executive authority. The room became still. On what basis? Financial instability. Undisclosed outside venture. Questions regarding company resources. Laurel's face changed. Not fear. Fury. Threshold North has used no Winslow industrial resources. I know. Every dollar is mine. I know. Who gave him the documents? I don't know. Jonah stepped away from the workbench. This is because of us? Laurel looked at him. No, it sounds like it. Sebastian has wanted control for years. And now he has an excuse. Laurel did not answer. That was answer enough. The board meeting lasted 6 hours. Jonah was not there. He spent the day installing a furnace for a retired couple on the south side. He checked his phone too often. No messages. At 4:30, he received one from Nora. Come tomorrow. 8. Nothing else. He arrived at 7:55. Laurel was in the carriage house. Alone, she looked exhausted. What happened? The board created an oversight committee. What does that mean? It means every strategic decision I make for 90 days is subject to review. Jonah's jaw tightened. Can they do that? They just did. What about Threshold? Separate company. Then we continue. Laurel looked at him. You don't understand. Probably not. Sebastian obtained your financial records. Jonah stopped. What records? Public filings, liens, late property tax notices, business debt. Heat moved up Jonah's neck. Why? To establish that you have a financial motive. For working, for becoming close to me. Jonah went very still. Laurel hated what she had to say next. He intends to argue that you targeted me. Jonah laughed once. There was no humor in it. He thinks I planned this? He doesn't need to believe it. He just needs other people to. Yes, Jonah walked toward the window. He looked outside. Snow covered the grounds. This is ridiculous. Yes, I didn't know about your money. I know. I didn't even know the carriage house existed. I know. I charged you $650 a day. I know. He turned. Then tell them. I have. And? They believe I may not be objective. That landed differently. Jonah looked at her. Because of me. Laurel said nothing. The silence gave shape to something neither had named. Jonah looked away first. What happens now? The Oversight Committee reviews Threshold North. No. Laurel's eyes sharpened. What? No Winslow board gets near it. I agree. You said they review strategic decisions. For Winslow Industrial. Then Threshold stays completely separate. That was always the plan. Good. Jonah took a breath. What else? Laurel hesitated. They may contact you. Let them. They may contact Elsie's school. Jonah's expression changed instantly. No, they are reviewing my judgment. My daughter has nothing to do with your judgment. I know. No, he was no longer calm. Jonah, no one drags Elsie into corporate politics. I agree. Can you stop them? Laurel hesitated. That was enough. Jonah looked toward the workbench, toward the prototypes, toward the brass level. Then back at Laurel. You need to buy me out. Her face went blank. What? Whatever percentage of threshold is technically mine. We have not finalized equity. Then easier. No, Laurel, no. If I'm not involved, Sebastian loses his argument. He will invent another. Maybe. You are not leaving. This isn't leaving. It sounds remarkably similar. Jonah lowered his voice. My daughter is 7. I know. She already lost one parent. I know. I will not let strangers investigate her life because I got too close to someone powerful. Laurel flinched at too close. Jonah saw it. Neither corrected it. I can protect her, Laurel said. With lawyers, if necessary. That's not the life I want for her. What about what you want? Jonah stared. The question was too direct. Too late. Too dangerous. He looked away. That stopped being first on the list a long time ago. Laurel's voice softened. It doesn't have to. Yes, he looked back at her. Sometimes it does. She hated him for saying it. Hated him more because some part of her understood. What are you asking for? Nothing. I can pay you for the work. You already did. The designs. We built them together. Your share has value. Then hold it for Elsie. No, Laurel. I will not let you walk away with nothing. I'm not asking to walk away. Then don't. The words broke slightly. Only slightly. Jonah heard. Laurel knew he heard. The carriage house seemed suddenly too small. Jonah stepped closer. Do you think I'm doing this because I want to? I don't know what you want. He stopped. Neither did he. Or maybe he did. That was worse. Laurel looked at him. Tell me. Jonah's voice became quiet. I want Sebastian to never say my daughter's name. That's not what I meant. I know. Then answer me. He could not. Not yet. Jonah picked up his coat. I'll finish the prototype documentation from home. Jonah, I'll send everything. Don't. He stopped at the door. Behind him, Laurel said, every man leaves when the cost becomes inconvenient. Jonah closed his eyes. He turned slowly. That's not fair. No. Her face was controlled again. It's accurate. Jonah walked back toward her. I am not Nathaniel. I know. I am not Sebastian. I know. I'm trying to protect my kid. I know. Then don't make this something ugly because you're angry. Her eyes glistened. She hated that. Hated tears. Hated weakness being visible. I don't know how to make it anything else. Jonah's anger disappeared. That was the moment. He could have reached for her. He wanted to. Instead, he crouched, so they were at eye level. I'm not disappearing. Laurel looked away. I'm going home. That sounds temporary when you say it. It is. How temporary? I don't know. She laughed bitterly. Of course. Jonah stood. He looked at the brass level on the bench, then at Elsie's drawing, still taped beside the whiteboard. I'll call tomorrow. Laurel did not answer. He left. The costly part came 3 days later. Sebastian's people did exactly what Laurel feared. They did not accuse Jonah publicly. They did something more effective. They asked questions. Was Mercer Mechanical properly insured for product development? Had Laurel transferred intellectual property to an unqualified contractor? Had corporate information been disclosed? Did Jonah owe money? Had Laurel paid him above market rates? Had he accepted gifts? Had he stayed overnight at the estate? Had his daughter? Questions designed so the existence of the question did the damage. 2 pilot contractors suspended negotiations. A lender withdrew from a small credit arrangement Jonah had been negotiating. Then his largest maintenance client called. We just need to wait until this settles. There was nothing to settle. That was the problem. Jonah lost nearly 40% of his monthly income in 4 days. He told Laurel none of it. She found out anyway. Nora discovered 1 suspended contract. Laurel discovered the rest. Friday morning, a courier arrived at Jonah's apartment. Inside the envelope was a cashier's check, $100,000. No note. Jonah stared at it. Elsie sat across the kitchen table eating cereal. Is that a lot? Yes, how much? A lot. Are we rich? No. Can we get pancakes? Jonah looked at her. We could get pancakes before. You said restaurant pancakes cost too much. Jonah looked at the check again. Then at his daughter. Put your shoes on. Why? We're going out. For pancakes? After he drove to the Winslow house. Laurel was in her office. Jonah entered without waiting for Nora to announce him. He placed the check on Laurel's desk. What is this? You know. I know the number. Then why ask? Because I didn't ask for it. You lost contracts because of me. Because of Sebastian. Because Sebastian is attacking me. Still Sebastian. Take the money. No, Jonah, no. Her eyes flashed. This is not charity. Then what is it? Compensation. For what? Damage? Did you cancel my contracts? No. Did you call my customers? No. Then you don't owe me. I brought you into this. I walked in. Because I hired you. For $650 a day. That stupid rate. It's a great rate. You have no savings. Jonah stiffened. You checked? I needed to know the extent of the damage. You checked my bank account? Not your bank account. Public financial records. Still feels lousy. You are 3 months behind on your truck. 2. Your rent increased. That's generally how rent works. Elsie needs dental work. Jonah's face changed. Laurel immediately knew she had crossed the line. How do you know that? Nora heard you rescheduling an appointment. That is not yours. I know. Do you? Yes, because right now it doesn't feel like it. Laurel's voice hardened defensively. I am trying to help. By writing a check. Yes, to solve me. No, feels familiar, doesn't it? She froze. Jonah regretted it the second he said it. Laurel's face became pale. He lowered his voice. That was unfair. Yes, I'm sorry. She looked toward the window. Jonah pushed the check closer. I need work. I can give you money. I know. I have more than I will ever spend. I figured. You are refusing because of pride. No. Then why? Because if threshold works, pay me for the work. If it doesn't, I'll fix furnaces. You may lose your apartment. Then I'll find another. Your truck. I've always hated that truck. Jonah. He leaned forward. I need to know something. Laurel looked at him. If you didn't have money, would you still want me here? Her expression changed. What? If the rumors were true, if this house belonged to the bank and Winslow Industrial collapsed tomorrow, and all you had was that brass level and a carriage house with a leaking roof, would you still want me around? Laurel stared. Yes, no hesitation. Jonah nodded. Good, he pushed the check the final few inches. Because that's the only answer I needed. He turned to leave. Laurel wants you. Elsie's voice came from the doorway. Both adults froze. Jonah closed his eyes. Elsie. She stood holding her winter coat. What? How long have you been there? Long enough. Laurel looked like she wanted the floor to open. Elsie walked into the office. You asked if she wanted you here. Adults were talking. I heard. That's usually what talking does. Jonah stared at his daughter. Laurel covered her mouth. He was almost certain she was hiding a smile. Elsie looked at Laurel. Do you want my dad here? Laurel lowered her hand. This was impossible. She ran companies, negotiated acquisitions, had once faced 300 employees during a factory closure and explained exactly why their jobs were ending. Nothing had prepared her for a 7-year-old asking a direct question. I enjoy your father's company. Elsie frowned. That's not what I asked. Jonah rubbed his forehead. Where did you learn to interrogate people? You. Laurel looked at him. That seems accurate. Elsie rolled her eyes. Do you like him? Silence, Jonah started. Elsie, yes, Laurel said it. Jonah stopped. Elsie smiled. Okay, she turned toward Jonah. You like her too. I'm taking you for pancakes. That means yes. Coat, I already have it. Car, Elsie walked out. Jonah remained where he was. Laurel did not look at him. He looked at her. Laurel, go get pancakes. Probably best. Yes, he reached the door. Jonah? He turned. She was still looking down at the desk. At the check. I'm sorry. For what? The check. He nodded. I know what you were trying to do. I don't. He understood that answer better than she expected. He left. The next week changed everything. Not dramatically, that would have been easier. Jonah began coming back to the carriage house. Not full-time. 2 evenings. Saturday mornings. Threshold North survived on almost nothing. Laurel paid every legitimate invoice. Jonah accepted every legitimate payment. Nothing extra. They documented everything. Separate computers, separate accounts, separate attorneys. Laurel laughed when Jonah insisted on his own lawyer despite the fact he could barely afford one. You're learning from a dangerous influence. Sebastian continued pushing. The board scheduled a final review for March. If Laurel could not prove Threshold North was independent and that her leadership had not compromised Winslow Industrial, the temporary oversight committee could become permanent. Sebastian expected her to fight for her position. Instead, Laurel built. She and Jonah refined the product. Elsie named one of the door modules Sidestep. Laurel tried to rename it. Customers liked Sidestep. Jonah never let Laurel forget this. One evening, Laurel's physical therapist arrived at the carriage house. Dr. Helen Morano had been working with her for nearly 2 years. Jonah prepared to leave. You don't have to, Laurel said. He looked at the equipment Helen's assistant was bringing inside. You sure? Yes, he stayed at the far end of the workshop. He worked. He did not watch. That mattered. Helen began with transfer exercises. Core stabilization, resistance, then parallel supports. Jonah heard movement behind him. Metal, breathing, Helen's quiet instructions. He kept his eyes on the prototype, then silence. Long silence. He looked despite himself. Laurel was upright. Not freely. Not independently. Her hands gripped the rails. Helen stood close. Laurel's legs trembled violently. Her face was white with effort. Jonah stopped breathing. Laurel looked at him. The moment their eyes met, something flashed across her face. Fear, not of falling. Of hope. Then her right knee buckled. Helen guided her down safely. Laurel turned away. Enough. Helen nodded. No celebration. No applause. Jonah understood. He went back to work. 20 minutes later, Helen left. Laurel remained beside the rails. Jonah tightened a screw that did not need tightening. Finally, she said, "You can say something." "All right." He waited. Laurel turned. "That was something." "Yes," he set down the screwdriver. "How long?" 11 seconds. "You counted?" Helen did. Jonah nodded. Laurel's expression tightened. "The doctors told me recovery after this long is unpredictable." "Sounds like doctors. I may never walk independently." "Okay." She stared. "Okay? What do you want me to say?" "I don't know." "Then okay." He walked over. "What matters?" Laurel looked at the rails. "I want options." Jonah nodded. "Then work for options. Not miracles. Not promises. Options." Laurel looked at him. That was exactly why she trusted him. He never needed her future to become more dramatic than her present. By March, Threshold North had orders. Real ones. 22 sidestep door conversion units. 14 modular entrances. 9 small business storefront adaptations. Not enough to make anyone rich. Enough to prove it was real. The board review arrived on a gray Thursday morning. Sebastian entered Winslow Industrial Headquarters expecting a private meeting. Laurel changed the venue. She invited outside counsel. Independent auditors. 2 major shareholders. The chair of the company foundation. And Jonah. He refused at first. "This is your fight. It is Threshold's fight too. I hate boardrooms. I know. Everyone wears shoes that cost more than my truck. Your truck is almost worthless." Exactly. He came anyway. He wore the only dark suit he owned. Elsie had chosen his tie. It had a tiny stain near the bottom from Rebecca's funeral 7 years earlier. He noticed while waiting outside the meeting room. He considered changing it. Then, decided not to. Some things could carry history without being ruined by it. Laurel entered last. Sebastian stood. "Laurel. Sit down." He did. The meeting began. Numbers, documents, questions. Auditors confirmed no Winslow industrial funds had gone to Threshold North. Counsel confirmed intellectual property had been developed independently. Jonah's attorney confirmed his compensation. $650 a day initially. Standard project rates later. No gifts. No loans. No unusual transfers. Sebastian leaned back. "That does not address the broader issue." Laurel looked at him. "Which issue?" "Judgment. Be specific." A chief executive forming a private business relationship with a financially distressed contractor she subsequently developed a personal attachment to. Jonah's jaw tightened. Laurel remained calm. "You mean Jonah. I mean Mr. Mercer. Then use his name." Sebastian glanced toward Jonah. "Laurel, this is precisely the problem." "What is?" "You are emotionally involved." Silence. Laurel did not deny it. Jonah looked at her. Sebastian sensed advantage. "You have spent 3 years making decisions from an increasingly isolated position. You reduced staff. Liquidated property. Withdrew from investment partnerships. According to information you yourself allowed to circulate, much of your personal fortune is gone." Laurel folded her hands. "According to information I allowed to circulate." Sebastian hesitated. "Yes." Laurel nodded toward counsel. A folder was placed in front of every voting participant. Sebastian opened his. His expression changed. Laurel watched him. "For 3 years," she said, "I allowed a simplified version of my personal finances to become publicly accepted." Sebastian turned a page. Another. His face lost color. "I sold properties I did not need. I closed visible accounts. I moved assets into structures that were already authorized under my father's estate plan." Jonah watched silently. This was the answer he had never asked for. Laurel continued. "My controlling interest in Winslow Industrial was never sold." Sebastian stopped moving. 43% of the voting company remains under the Winslow Family Stewardship Trust. She paused. I am its sole controlling beneficiary. One of the shareholders leaned forward. Sebastian looked up sharply. That structure was supposed to have been dissolved. No, the filings are private where legally permitted. Laurel's voice remained quiet. Additionally, my personal investment holdings were not destroyed by medical expenses, litigation, or restructuring. She turned one page. My liquid and privately managed assets exceed the figure reported before my accident. Jonah slowly looked at her. She did not look back. Sebastian did the math. Everyone in the room did. The woman he had treated as financially weakened was not weakened. The fortune had never disappeared. She had hidden its shape. Laurel looked directly at Sebastian. You believed I was vulnerable because I wanted certain people to believe it. His face tightened. This is absurd. Is it? You manipulated the board. No. You concealed material information. My personal finances are not a corporate disclosure obligation. My ownership interest has been properly documented at all times. Counsel spoke. That is correct. Sebastian looked around the table. The room had moved away from him. Laurel continued. You argued that my judgment was compromised because Jonah Mercer had a financial motive to become close to me. She looked toward Jonah now. His expression was unreadable. So I asked the auditors to examine every transaction between us. She slid one final page across the table. He had multiple opportunities to request loans, advances, or gifts. Sebastian said nothing. He never did. Jonah looked down. Laurel continued. When his contracts were suspended because of this investigation, I sent him $100,000. Jonah's head came up. He returned it. One shareholder looked toward him. Laurel's voice softened by a fraction. I later offered investment capital on terms favorable enough that his attorney called them irrational. A few quiet smiles appeared. He refused those too. Jonah muttered. They were irrational. The chair almost laughed. Laurel looked at him. Then back at Sebastian. Mr. Mercer has never asked me for a cent beyond what he earned. There it was. The truth of the title. Not a performance. Not a test Jonah had known he was taking. A record. Months of invoices. Months of pressure. Months of being offered shortcuts he refused. Sebastian tried one final time. You expect us to believe this relationship has nothing to do with money? Laurel looked at Jonah. Then she answered. No. Sebastian seemed surprised. Laurel continued. I expect you to understand that money is the least interesting thing about it. Silence. Jonah felt something move in his chest. Sebastian looked toward the board chair. This is inappropriate. The chair closed the folder. What appears inappropriate, Sebastian, is using personal insinuation to manufacture a governance crisis unsupported by the audit. Sebastian's face hardened. The oversight committee ended that afternoon. His attempt to expand his authority failed. 3 months later, he resigned from the board. There was no dramatic humiliation. No security escort. No shouting. He simply lost, quietly, which Laurel found more satisfying than she expected. The real Threshold North launch happened 2 weeks later. Not at a hotel. Not at Winslow Industrial. At the carriage house. Jonah insisted. This is where it started. Laurel agreed. Customers came. Contractors. Occupational therapists. Architects. Small business owners. People from older neighborhoods where full renovations cost more than the buildings could justify. Elsie stood beside the sidestep prototype, telling anyone who would listen that she had invented the entire company. Jonah corrected her twice. Then, gave up. Nora cried before the event started, and denied it immediately. Near the end of the afternoon, Jonah found Laurel alone beside the old workbench. The brass level sat in front of her. You hiding? from people. At your own launch? Especially at my own launch. Jonah stood beside her. You did good. We did. Your version has more lawyers. Your version had pencil drawings. Pencils are cheap. So are lawyers when you compare them to litigation. He smiled. Laurel touched the brass level. My grandfather would have liked this. The company? The workshop being used. Jonah nodded. He'd complain about our tolerances. Definitely, they stood quietly. Then Laurel said, Helen is coming. Jonah looked at her. Now? Yes, why? She did not answer. 30 minutes later, after most guests had moved toward the main house for dinner, Helen brought the parallel rails into the workshop. Jonah understood. Laurel, don't. He stopped. She transferred. Positioned her feet. Gripped the rails. Helen watched closely. Ready? Laurel nodded. She pushed. Her arms took much of the weight. Her legs took some. Then more. Her body rose. Slowly, unevenly, she stood. Jonah did not speak. Elsie entered halfway through. Her eyes widened. Jonah placed one finger against his lips. She nodded. 10 seconds. 15. Laurel's arms trembled. 20. Helen stayed close. 25. Laurel looked toward Jonah. He was not smiling wildly. Not crying. Not asking for more. He was simply there. 30. 31. Laurel sat. Her breathing came hard. Helen crouched beside her. Good, Laurel nodded. 31 seconds. No miracle. No promise about tomorrow. But hers. Elsie ran forward only after Helen stepped away. You stood. Laurel laughed breathlessly. I did. For 31 seconds. You counted? Dad did. Laurel looked at Jonah. He shrugged. I count things. Elsie wrapped her arms around Laurel. Laurel stiffened from surprise. Then held her. Jonah turned his face away for a moment. When he looked back, Laurel was watching him over Elsie's shoulder. Later, after everyone left, Jonah returned to the carriage house. Laurel was still there. The night was cold. The lake beyond the windows looked black. You should be resting. I have been sitting most of the day. Fair argument. He leaned against the bench. Laurel turned the brass level between her fingers. I owe you an answer. For what? The question Elsie asked. Jonah smiled. She asked several hundred. The important one. His smile disappeared. Laurel's voice became quiet. I spent years hiding money because I wanted to know who would stay when they believed there was nothing to gain. Jonah listened. I thought that would tell me who people were. Did it? Sometimes, she looked at him. But it also turned every relationship into an examination. Jonah nodded. That sounds exhausting. It was. So stop. She smiled faintly. You make everything sound simple. No, I make simple things sound simple. And this? Not simple. He stepped closer. Laurel looked up. I know you never asked me for money. Correct, I know you returned money you needed. Jonah grimaced. I probably shouldn't have returned all of it. She laughed. I know. He became serious. Laurel, I didn't refuse because your money is bad. I understand. I refused because I needed you to know I could stand beside you without owing you my place there. Her eyes filled. Jonah continued. You've had too many people make affection into a transaction. He glanced at the brass level. I didn't want us measured that way. Us, the word stayed between them. Laurel looked down. What do you want? This time Jonah answered. You, her eyes lifted. He swallowed. And this annoying company. She laughed through the tears. And the carriage house. Obviously Nora's sandwiches. They're excellent. And 6 chimneys? Still excessive. Laurel reached for his hand. Jonah let her take it. You realize I am extraordinarily wealthy. So I've heard. How wealthy? Jonah smiled. Still don't care. That is incredibly irritating. I know. You could at least be curious. I am curious. Then ask. Jonah leaned closer. No, why? Because apparently it drives you crazy. She stared at him. Then she pulled him closer. Their first kiss was not dramatic. No music, no applause, no sudden transformation. Just warmth in a workshop that had been empty for years. When they separated, Laurel rested her forehead against his. You are difficult. I've received similar feedback. Frequently? Mostly from you. She kissed him again. Elsie found them 20 seconds later. I knew it. Jonah stepped back. You are supposed to be at Grandma's. She's outside. Jonah looked toward the door. His mother stood there smiling. He closed his eyes. This family has no boundaries. Elsie walked toward the workbench. What is that? She picked up the brass level. Laurel's hand moved instinctively, then stopped. No one touched that level. Not staff, not contractors, not visitors. It had belonged to her grandfather. Then, to her. It carried a lifetime of memories. Elsie held it carefully. What does it do? Laurel watched the child turn it over. It tells you when something is balanced. Elsie studied the bubble in the glass. It's crooked. Jonah looked. The bench? Elsie nodded. Jonah checked. She was right. Laurel laughed. My grandfather would be furious. Jonah took the level. Tomorrow? You're fixing it tomorrow? Absolutely, it has been crooked for 60 years. Then it's overdue. Months passed. Threshold North grew slowly, exactly the way Jonah wanted. They hired 3 people. Then 7. They rejected a national rollout because Jonah said production quality would collapse. Laurel argued for 2 days. Then admitted he was right. Jonah framed the email. Laurel threatened him. Elsie put it on the office wall. Laurel continued physical therapy. Some weeks brought progress. Some did not. She stood longer. Then shorter. She learned to transfer more easily. She took a few assisted steps between rails. They never built their life around a promise that she would someday walk into a sunset. That was not the point. Her body did not owe anyone a symbolic ending. She had options. More than before. That was enough. Jonah eventually replaced his truck. Not with Laurel's money. Threshold North paid him properly, which Laurel insisted was completely different. He admitted she was right. She framed that email. When Elsie turned 8, Laurel gave her a small toolbox. Jonah gave Laurel a look. She asked for one. She is 8. She has excellent mechanical instincts. She stripped 3 screws last week. Training. She glued a hinge shut. Experimentation. You two are dangerous. Elsie grinned. A year after the day Jonah first entered the Winslow house, they stood in the carriage house after everyone had gone home. The brass level remained on the workbench. Elsie's original sidestep drawing hung above it in a frame. The blue marker lines were crooked. The idea was not. Laurel rolled beside Jonah. You know what I used to think? That 6 chimneys were reasonable? I'm serious. So am I. She nudged him. Then looked toward the drawing. I thought the hardest thing about losing trust was that you stopped believing other people. Jonah waited. I was wrong. What's harder? You stopped believing yourself. He looked at her. You question every motive, every kindness, every good thing. She touched the brass level. You keep checking whether the world is balanced because you no longer trust your own eyes. Jonah nodded. And now? Laurel looked at him. Now I know balance doesn't mean nothing moves. He smiled. That's good. My grandfather said it. Of course he did. I improved it. Of course you did. She took his hand. Outside, the lake moved against the shore. Inside, the workshop lights glowed over scratched benches. New prototypes, old tools and a child's drawing that had become a company. Jonah had entered Laurel's life needing money. That part mattered. He had bills, responsibilities, a daughter depending on him. He was never above need. And Laurel had money. Far more than anyone around her understood. That mattered too. But the thing that joined them was not a rich woman saving a struggling father. It was not a man repairing a damaged woman. Neither of them needed to become smaller for the other to become important. Jonah gave Laurel something her fortune could not purchase. A relationship that did not begin with an invoice hidden inside affection. Laurel gave Jonah something his pride had nearly taught him to refuse. A place where accepting partnership did not mean surrendering dignity. He showed her that staying could be an action, rather than a promise. She showed him that receiving love was not the same as owing a debt. And somewhere between an unreliable elevator, an old carriage house, a crooked doorway, a 7-year-old's drawing, and 31 quiet seconds between parallel rails, two people who had spent years carrying different kinds of weight learned the same thing. The right person does not arrive to rescue you. They do not measure what you own before deciding what you are worth. They do not demand that your wounds disappear so loving you becomes convenient. They simply see the life in front of them, then choose to build inside it. Years later, the brass level still sat on the workbench. Not locked away. Not hidden. Used. There were new scratches along its edges now. Some belonged to Jonah. Some to Laurel. Several probably belonged to Elsie, though she denied responsibility. And if someone placed that old level on the workbench, the bubble rested perfectly between the two black lines. Jonah had fixed the bench. Of course he had, but Laurel eventually understood that her grandfather had been right about something deeper. Balance was never about standing perfectly still. It was about knowing what remained true while everything else moved. Her money had moved. Her body had changed. Her company had changed. Jonah's grief had changed. Elsie had grown. Threshold North had gone from pencil marks on a whiteboard to thousands of doorways people could enter without asking someone else to make room. Almost everything moved. One thing did not. Jonah never once asked how much Laurel Winslow was worth. Because by then, he already knew.